This is Image City Photography Gallery's show we call The Magic of Light 2021. One of our guest photographers is Tom Knauss. That photograph you call Top Hat, that won
Oh,
the
Black
award.
Hat.
That's a beautiful, beautiful portrait. I love seeing that one in the gallery.
Yeah, we spent about 4 hours taking that picture. She had to sit real still because I had the camera on a tripod because you could go out of frame so fast, and she had to sit still. And I actually put something behind her head to lean her head against because she couldn't move. Then I had to fuss with the lights. I used four Nikon speed lights, SB800s, to light that up, and I play with it and play with it. And I had to dial them way down because I had to get the lights real close to her so they wouldn't flare out too far. I don't remember exactly anymore what the settings were, but they were dialed way, way down, 3-4 stops at least. It took a while to get that, mostly to get that black hat to have a nice edge off the black background. So you could actually, you got black on black. So to get that to contrast out and still look black, that was tricky.
It looked like you had lights on the left and lights on the right, and a little bit of backlight as well. Yeah. Did you have a hair light on top for the hat or no?
I did. I had 4 lights. I don't think I had more than 4. I normally don't use those speed lights. I use bigger lights with soft boxes and umbrellas and all that stuff. And I do have a light I have up in the ceiling that I would put scoops on and stuff like that. I didn't use any of that stuff. It was just those Nikon speed lights. And, they're good lights. There's no reason not to use them.
The way we selected our winners is the 9 gallery partners went around and selected our favorite images. Your photograph, Top Hat, is the only one that all 9 of us had on our voting ballots. Yeah, so you got a 9 out of 9 on that. So that tells you what.
Amazing. I mean,
we think it's a beautiful image. Yeah, and it is.
Well, thank you. I'm quite honored at that. That's I never expected that. If it was an experimental type picture, and somebody, there were a lot of paid jobs, but sometimes we had spare time and we practiced and horsed around a little bit. And that's kind of how that picture came about.
An experiment that turned out really well, that's for sure. You obviously know what you're doing. It's just a beautiful job. Yeah.
Well, I guess if you spend enough time with it, something will happen.
Well, it's interesting that you're both a studio photographer and a landscape photographer, and you're obviously quite accomplished at both. I'm really impressed, Tom, and we're glad to have you in Rochester and have you participating in the gallery with us. We're pleased to have you around. It's wonderful.
Thank you. I'll tell you one thing real quick. You work in a studio, you learn about light. You can do landscapes and all that, and you kind of take what you get and you pick your days. But in a studio, you got to make it. It's not there. In fact, there's nothing there. It's an empty room. And if you don't create it, your idea and everything that make that idea happen, I learned more about light in the studio in an empty room than I ever did before. That's what did it for me.
Well, that's interesting. I've thought about that. A really accomplished studio photographer in this area is a guy named Doug Hansgate. And Doug is over in the Buffalo area. Doug produces beautiful work along the lines of what you've done there. And I've considered taking a couple of classes with Doug. He teaches studio photography. And even though that's something totally out of character for me, I'm clearly a landscape and cityscape and architectural type photographer generally. But, it would expand my horizons so much to know about studio photography. And still, I'm seriously considering taking a class with Doug because I think I would learn a lot from that I could probably translate into other parts of my photography. But it's interesting that you mentioned that you create your images in the studio. And that's interesting. I'd never thought about that.
Well, you should do it. There's a lot of photographers in Jackson, as you could imagine.
Mm-hmm.
And many of them, after the studio was around for a year or two, a lot of them would drift by and call me very discreetly and say, can I come over and shoot at your place for a little bit? And so these were really accomplished photographers. Some have been around since the 70s and 80s. And so they'd come over and you'd find out that they really didn't know how to work in the studio whatsoever. And I'm not talking about working with people, models and such. I'm talking about working with the light. They're so used to shooting outdoors. So I would try to teach them a little bit and say, well, this is how you get this effect, and teach them about how light falls off, and balancing light, getting multiple lights going. That gets a little tricky, stuff like that. But yeah, go over to the guy and do some shooting in the studio.
Are you looking for studio space in the area here?
Yeah, yeah. We're not sure. When I say we, I mean myself, and I'll probably get a partner.
So I'm looking forward to it. I can't wait for you to get set up so I can come see what a really professional portrait studio looks like. I learned something about the barns. Knowing the Moore Monroe barns, I always thought it was the Moulton barn. I didn't know there were two of them.
Yeah.
I went in the gallery yesterday. I saw your sunrise photograph. No mountains behind it. I said, "Well, no, wait a minute." I said,
Yeah.
"How could you have a photograph of this barn without the mountains behind it?" And I realized that I had to do with the fog or the clouds or whatever, and the backlit sun and so forth. But that's a beautiful photograph. I love that.
It was kind of by accident. If I recall, there was supposed to be a blood moon. I think I was preparing to photograph that, and that didn't work out. But clouds, it was heavy clouds that day. I had to go out there on snowshoes because the roads were closed at that time of year. The sky on the west side of the peaks was clear, and I could see blue sky. But over the valley, it wasn't socked in like a smooth overcast. It was just layers and layers of clouds. And what would happen as the clouds moved around, as they build over the peaks, and then they, blow east, the sun would dance around, light up the snow-covered peaks and stuff like that. And it was just constantly changing, constantly changing. So I had to wait a little bit, and I was watching it, and I finally took the shot, and I underexposed it quite a bit. I didn't want to take a chance of blowing the highlights out.
It really caught my attention because I didn't see the mountains, and I thought, well, something's not right here. In fact, I had to pull up a photo on my phone just so I could take a look and see if I was mistaken about that particular barn. But no, that's it. There's definitely are mountains behind it. I've never seen either of those barns. Maybe in all my time out there, they must not be right on a main road or something.
There's a dirt road that's called Antelope Flats out that way. And there's a road that goes off, it goes east, it goes off to your right. That's called Antelope Flats Road. It's open in the summer. Dirt road that crosses, and the barn in this picture would be to the north, your left. Other barn, the T.A. Moulton barn, is to the south, quarter of a mile at the most. I mean, you can see it. Every structure has a story. And then there's a bunch of sheds. Used to be you could actually go in the sheds. Not anymore.
Tom, you're a great personality and a great photographer, and it's a real honor and a pleasure to meet you and have you in the Rochester area. Thank you, Tom, and I hope visitors will come to the gallery to see your award-winning photograph and the other photographs we have on display at 722 University Avenue in Rochester.